Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Friday to you. I know you're ready for the weekend. I'm definitely ready for the weekend. And I think we're going to have some fine weather here locally, and we don't have a whole lot to talk about in Let's Talk Tropics when it comes to active weather out there. But we still have the remnants of a tropical storm, and we've also got a tropical wave that's looking fairly strong out there, and it probably will become our next named storm. So let's take a real quick look and see what's going on outside right now. We're at 91 degrees with a few clouds starting to mix in. Feels like 101 out there with that dew point at 74, but that dew point is going to come down a little bit more as some dry air mixes down from the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and we've also got a secondary front that's going to be pushing through, so that'll increase those northerly breezes. And I don't know if anybody was outside very early this morning, but it was definitely feeling much better out there. I immediately walked out and went, man, this is great, because it was in the 70s for the first time in a number of days, and it just wasn't nearly as muggy out there. So it is early to mid-August. We'll take what we can get. If we can get lower humidities with temperatures in the upper 90s, then we'll go ahead and take it. Check out our traffic cams here this afternoon as we are looking at mostly sunny skies. Just a few thin clouds that are out there this morning or this afternoon, and I think we'll see a little bit more of that mixing in as we get into the latter part of the day. So very, very quiet conditions locally. And we've also seen most of the showers and thunder showers that were out in the offshore waters have now dissipated right along that first frontal boundary that's went ahead and moved on through. So let's go ahead real quick. I want to look at the wave heights over the Gulf of Mexico for anybody who's got maybe some weekend plans, because I think what you're seeing out there right now is basically what you're going to be seeing over the Gulf of Mexico over the course of the weekend. So if you got some boating plans, or maybe you're going to be working out there this weekend, the winds and seas are going to be fairly light out there, and we should be in pretty good shape. About 1 to 2 foot seas in the nearshore waters and 2 to 3 foot seas out in the offshore waters. So let's get started on what we've got active right now, which is active but yet inactive. This is the remnants of what was at one time Hurricane Debby when it made landfall there along the Florida coast. The center of circulation, or what's left of this, is now moving through the mid-Atlantic and now into the New England states, and is still going to be a flood threat for at least another couple of days before the trough that's over the Great Lakes that has helped us out with a series of cold fronts will also push this back out to sea. So New England, the Canadian Maritimes will have some more heavy rain today and tomorrow, and then I think what's left of Debby will be flying back out over the Atlantic Ocean and kind of mix in with a stronger low pressure over the northern Atlantic that will probably affect the UK as well as much of Europe sometime later on. Check it out again, the Gulf of Mexico satellite. We had a front that came through overnight, which is kind of the first wave of the drier air that's kind of filtering in here across Acadiana. There's a secondary front that's about ready to go through as well, so that'll just reinforce the dry air. Unfortunately, it is August. It's very difficult to get us a nice cool shot. I will say 20 years ago, about this week, we had a cold front come through, and if you weren't around in Acadiana back then, we had some morning low temperatures in the 50s, believe it or not. Not going to happen this time around. I started talking about this cool front a few days ago, and I feel like I might have jinxed the cool, but at least we're getting the dry out there. As far as the Central American satellite, the tropical wave that we were actually looking at earlier in the week, is basically located right about here, and it's going to continue to drift off toward the west. It'll bring some heavy downpours there to the Yucatan, Belize, Guatemala, and the coastal sections of Honduras, while the rest of Central America, from Nicaragua to Costa Rica and Panama, is all looking fine, and I think they're going to stay fair today, but maybe some showers coming in for tomorrow. Meanwhile, as we look at the Caribbean, very, very quiet out there this time around. We still have a bit of an upper trough that's up here to the north. Nice trade winds that are kind of drifting westward over the Caribbean Sea and the western part of the Atlantic as well. Not really seeing the bulk of our bigger tropical wave. Got a few showers that are going to come in here to Trinidad and Tobago and move over the southern windward islands, but no threat of any development out in that particular region. But as we get out here in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean, this is the next tropical wave that we're going to be watching. You can see this flare up here of a lot of thunderstorm activity. I think this is going to start to get more organized over the course of the weekend as a low pressure area, and then kind of move its way in this general direction as we head into the early part of next week. And the reason I think that is that ridge of high pressure that is usually over the central part of the Atlantic here is kind of backing off a little bit. So rather than having our tropical systems kind of work their way across the Caribbean Sea, they're going to turn more around the periphery of that high pressure ridge and kind of make its way off toward the north. Now, it doesn't mean that the East Coast is out of the woods, but I do think the Gulf of Mexico is going to shut down from anything that might be coming from this general direction, at least over the next few days. And there's a real quick look at the eastern Atlantic as we look directly down on that tropical wave. And again, it is starting to look a little bit more organized, and I think it's going to have plenty of time to get itself together. And I really believe this is probably going to be a tropical depression by the time it reaches the northern part of the Leeward Islands and over into the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, as well as Puerto Rico. Now, here's your tropical weather outlook, and the National Hurricane Center kind of put the blip on here about a day and a half ago, I guess, and now we're still looking at a fairly medium chance for development as it moves off toward the west. So I think the first couple of days we're going to be in pretty good shape, but the National Hurricane Center now puts that orange area as a 60% chance for development. So even though we're still in the mid-range, we are at the top of that mid-range when you get up to 60%. So I would not be surprised to see that area turning red on our 7-day forecast tomorrow, mainly because almost all of our global models are putting down a tropical system somewhere in this particular area during the week next week. So let's kind of review some of our models, and we'll start with the American model, the GFS, and we'll go ahead and take this all the way out through August the 18th. As we come on live here, that's about as far out as the GFS model goes, and you can see there's a low kind of scooting the east coast of the United States. Unfortunately, the GFS is putting a tropical system over near the Carolinas sometime next weekend, not this weekend, but about a week from this weekend. That would not be good because they just have been dealing with Tropical Storm Debby that decided to be that unwelcome guest that overstayed her stay for a number of days. So those folks really can't take a whole lot of rain. But with the four models that I'm going to show you, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to look at a week from today. So we're going out this time Friday, and you can see the GFS has a low pressure area here over the Bahamas, and then as we saw with the extended part of the forecast, it kind of drifts it up here toward the Carolinas. And again, the GFS goes out even farther than next weekend, but by the time we come on here at noon, it hasn't completed all of the frames. The Euro, on the other hand, and again, we'll take this out through next Sunday, so we're going out through the 18th. And it also is showing a pretty vigorous tropical wave here, or maybe a low pressure area developing over the northern windward, or rather leeward islands, and then also taking more of a turn around this big ridge of high pressure. But you may have noticed in those last few frames that it was not pushing this tropical system up closer to the United States. It was actually starting to make this turn quite a bit earlier and moving it out to sea and avoiding the United States and also avoiding the Gulf of Mexico. So the Euro model is a little bit farther to the east than what the GFS model is showing. So the GFS is kind of over the Bahamas, while the Euro model is kind of curving it northward, avoiding the Bahamas and staying out to sea. Let's move on to the Canadian model. Again, we're going to take this all the way through next weekend, and just like the first two, it is showing a tropical system developing in this particular area. But the Canadian is very close to the European. In fact, it might even be farther to the east, keeping this ridge way out here, which would turn this a lot earlier and then go ahead and keep it farther away from the United States. Again, this is a little bit farther to the east than what we were seeing the Euro, but also down here, after that first initial system kind of moves around, we don't have a whole lot of activity coming out of the Atlantic Ocean, which is a little bit different from some of the other computer models. As we look at a week from today on the Canadian, again, it is much farther out to sea than what the Euro shows, and even farther out to sea than what the GFS was showing. So again, you've got the GFS that's still the farthest west, Euro is kind of in the middle, and the Canadian is much farther east. And all three of those that I just showed you is a week from today. Let's finish up here with the ICON model. And the ICON is actually not just showing a tropical system kind of moving over the northern Caribbean and possibly moving across some of the islands, maybe a little farther to the south of what the first two models are showing, but it's also showing more tropical waves out in the Atlantic, more of a parade, and even another wave a little bit farther out. So as you go out a week from today, because the ICON only goes out 180 hours, so I'm taking this all the way out until Friday of next week, and the ICON a week from today is also showing a low very close to the Bahamas. So this is a little bit closer to what the GFS was showing. You can see the GFS, and now you can see the ICON, which is pretty close there. And then the Euro was a little bit farther to the east, and the Canadian was even farther out to the east. So I really think just by basically looking at the four models that we have, that it's pretty likely that we're going to have a tropical system in that general area sometime next week. So we will have something to talk about, but I think the good news is this is not going to come into the Western Caribbean or into the Gulf of Mexico. So for right now, most of these tropical waves, as long as that big ridge of high pressure stays out in the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean and we get some decent troughs to come off the North American continent, it should be able to yank these northward and keep us protected here in the Gulf of Mexico, at least for the next week to week and a half. Now, that's not a promise, because you can always have something just flare up off the Florida coast or the Bay of Campeche or even down in the southwestern part of the Caribbean Sea. But right now, the models just don't seem to want to show anything coming close to the Gulf of Mexico. If anything were to move in that one general area, though, the water temperatures are very warm in this area, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius. So you're going 84 to 86 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. That is plenty warm for any tropical system to work with. And the tropical cyclone heat potential is also quite high, not just over the Caribbean, but north of the Caribbean as well, in the western part of the Atlantic, and even that area where we think we're going to see some development. We have high heat potential, which is 80-degree water that goes very far down below the surface. So as this tropical system tries to work through, it can still churn up some of that premium fuel that's down below the surface of the ocean. The shear has also really dropped off, so this is the other inhibiting factor, but we've got very low wind shear in this area, not just where our tropical wave is right now, but also where it's going to go. And it looks like from some of the models that the wind shear is going to stay fairly low in this particular area. And then if it does make a turn out into the Atlantic Ocean, it might stay in a lower area of wind shear. So, and this is typical as we get into the latter part of August and September, you do start to see wind shear over the Atlantic Basin start to relax. And that's when you normally start to see that parade of low pressure areas coming off of the Atlantic coast or the African coast. And because there's not as much wind shear, these tropical waves have a lot easier time developing. And as we were talking about yesterday, for the last 5 years, the average number of named storms that we have developed after today is roughly 15 or 16. So we could have a lot of names being crossed off the list, and if we end up with 16 on top of the 4 we've already had, that's going to take us to 20 named storms. So that is a very busy season. Last year, I believe we were at 23, and back in 2020, which was the record, we were up to 30 named storms that particular year. So all the forecasts in the preseason that we've seen is indicating a busy season, and even the updates have shown a busy season, even though we've only got 4 that are under our belt right now. It really isn't out of the question that we could see over 20 before the season is over. And as I've told you before, during the month of August, pretty much all of the Atlantic Ocean is open for business, and this map looks very similar to September. And then once we start to get into October, our development zones are more over the Caribbean, the Western Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico. And then in November, it's pretty much the Caribbean and the far southwestern Atlantic there near the Bahamas. So activity is going to be ramping up over the next several weeks. The peak of the hurricane season is September the 10th. So while things are quiet, this is the best time to do your preparation. Make sure you know what you need to do at home, items that you need to have, and go ahead and secure those now while everything's at the stores and you don't have big crowds out there to fight. Well, that's about all I got here for this Friday, August the 9th. I do not expect to be doing any lives on Let's Talk Tropics over the weekend. If we do have a tropical depression form or we get an official disturbance, I'll probably update most of those on my social media pages. If you go to Facebook and search Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, or at Meteorologist Dave Baker, you'll find my page there. And if you're on X, I'm at Dave Baker TV, and I update all of those there. And by the way, if you're one of the several that have hit me with a friend request on my original television Facebook page, those only allow you to have 5,000, so you need to follow the other page, or you can follow that one too. There's a follow button there. All of my social media pages are basically updated at the same time with the exact same stuff. So no matter which social media platform you're using, Facebook or Twitter, you should be able to get the same information no matter which page you follow. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. If you like this video, please like this one and also subscribe to my channel. Tell your friends too, and turn on the notifications. That way, if anything pops up over the weekend, you will know if I do a live Let's Talk Tropics, or of course you can follow the social media pages for all of the latest. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday.